Hello, little children. I hope you are doing well. We are at our final lesson. So we got today and tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, there'll be information posted. It's probably going to be posted by Miss Atkinson as to the time for your virtual celebration. We're doing that by math class. So let's say your first block, Miss Atkinson, all of that group will meet together and the teachers will come to it. So hopefully she'll have some more information posted. So there'll kind of be like 4 separate celebrations, 2 on Thursday, 2 on Friday. So that will be arranged by your math class. So look to her for some more information. When I get the exact times, I will post it as well. So this is our last lesson. And to understand the Cold War, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story from when I was in 7th grade. The story is kind of difficult to tell with you not being able to see me. So you're going to have to kind of use your imagination just a little bit. The junior high that I went to, and that's kind of another version of middle school, was in a very rural area. Not a lot of people. The school was built in the late 1940s, early 1950s, and it's every bit as big, if not bigger, than West Johnson or Cleveland High School. There was a very unique feature to this particular school, though. If we want to go see a concert, we can go to the PNC Center. If we want to go see like a circus, there's like Dorton Arena. There's all kinds of these like civic center type places. Even Clayton has one, or somewhat of one, where they can put on a large performance. There's one at Johnson Community College. Our school, in addition to being a school, had built onto it in the 1950s, essentially like a civic center. It's an auditorium, but it's not an auditorium like we played The Lion King in at school. It's an auditorium that can hold a couple thousand people. It's an auditorium that has a balcony. So there are people sitting 20, 30 feet up in the air, and then there's another layer on top of that. This is a huge area. I want you to think 4 or 5 times the size of our gymnasium. So a very, very massive area. And this school had this because in the 1950s, 1960s, if a circus came to town, that's where it would perform. Do you imagine having an area so big in the school that it could host like a country music concert? Like that's a big deal, but my school had that. In the 1960s, the town that I grew up in, it grew a bunch. So, they decided to make an official arena or an official civic center that could hold thousands and thousands of people, like 10 or 12,000 people, much larger area. They could have it's big enough they could have a car race inside of it. So anyway, what do you do now with this part of a school that is that big and is not being used? Here's what my school did. Again, I wasn't even born yet, but they made it into the lunchroom. Thought that's kind of interesting. So I want you to picture a stage. This stage is bigger than our basketball court at school. This stage is bigger than our entire lunchroom. It's a big stage. You could have circus animals on it. That's how big it is. And you're standing on the stage and you look out and it kind of goes upward. But there's all these seats, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of seats. And if you look up, on top of that, there's hundreds of seats in the second row. And then on the third story, there's more seats. So it's kind of like DPAC in Durham. It's a big area, and that's where we ate our lunchroom. This is a pretty impressive building that you come in, you got this school, you go to the lunchroom, and you're in this massive area. It's not quite like the PNC Center, but it's definitely like Dorton Arena. Like, it's a big area, but that's where we ate lunch. Now, the kids would eat lunch up on this stage, and if you walk to the end of the stage, there's like an 8-foot drop down into the audience. That's a big drop. And interestingly enough, they had silent lunch down in the audience. So if you got in trouble, you would have to go sit in those seats and look up on the stage. Just like 50 or 40 years earlier, people sat in those seats and looked up onto the stage and saw a concert, or saw the circus, or saw the Globetrotters. So anyway, with that said, I had a friend, and he's just strange. I'm sure you all have this friend. They're just weird. His name was Griff. And Griff would sit with us at lunch. And our lunches were a little different than the lunches we have at Cleveland. Our lunches were all the kids mixed together. So it's a junior high, so it's 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. You sit anywhere you wanted. There's only a couple teachers in there. It kind of worked like high school. So we finally find my friends and I finally find a place to sit down, and Griff couldn't find anyone to sit with, so we let him sit with us. Griff is strange. Don't know how to explain it. He's just very peculiar. Stuff he thinks is funny, nobody else would think is funny. Things that he does that you wouldn't dream of, he would do them. I remember one time in high school, I saw Griff after gym class. I'm walking beside of him. I said, "Hey, Griff, I haven't seen you this year. How are you?" He said, "Fine." And then he goes, "Oh, my goodness." I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "I forgot my pants." He'd walked out of the locker room in just his underwear. He didn't put on his pants. So Griff is very strange. Can't quite explain it. He's just a very strange dude. One day in the middle of our lunch, Griff gets up and walks all the way to the end of the stage. He is in the deepest part of the stage as he can be. He is as far away from the audience part. It kind of looks like a bowl where people sit and look up on this stage. He's as far away as you can get. And he takes off running across this stage full speed. He runs and runs and runs and runs, and he gets to the end of the stage and he jumps off of it. My friends and I are howling. He just jumped off this stage. Again, the stage is like probably 8 feet. So think of our classroom door. It's a huge area. Like, he just jumped off of it. A few seconds later, you see some fingers up on top of the stage, and he pulls himself up and crawls back up onto the stage. No teacher saw him. Nobody did anything. He walks all the way back down to the edge of the stage again. Takes off running and just jumps off. We are howling. We think this is the greatest thing, and he climbs back up and does it again. Well, the next time he jumped, he didn't climb back up. Now, you got to remember, this is a stage. We can see off of the stage, and we never saw him walk into the audience, never go out the exit. This is a big jump. So we got up out of our lunch table, and we walked to the edge of the stage, and we looked for him to see if he'd fallen and gotten hurt, and we didn't see him. But we noticed that part of the stage is broken open, okay? So think of it as almost like an L, an upside down L. Like, we're on the stage, we're looking down, and this under part of the stage, there's a door there, it's broken open. And so, like, I've never even noticed a door there before. A lot of stages will have trap doors. That's how they get things in and out during a play. So we walk down the steps like normal people. That's too high to jump. And we get to this opening in the stage. It's at the front. The audience could see it. If you were standing on the stage, you'd have to lean over to see it. It was one of the coolest things I had seen in my life. There were all of these steps, just step after step after step. I had no idea where it went to. It's just weird. Like, where's this go? Maybe Griff fell into there. And again, I've never seen it before, never noticed it. So my friends and I began walking down these steps. And we come to a landing. That's like a really flat step, like a flat area. Think of you walk up a flight of steps, and then maybe you're going to turn to go up another flight. And it's just that really flat area. It's much larger than the rest of the steps. So we walked down and walked down. It's starting to get kind of dark down there. There's only one light. It's not giving up a whole bunch of light. But we saw Griff laying there. He had fallen down all of those steps. And he was laying there and he's moaning. So we did what any good friend would do. We stepped over Griff to see where all these steps were going. And sure enough, we went down several more steps till we finally got to the bottom. And what we saw at the bottom of all these steps is a ton of dust, very little light. But it looked like a bank vault. This huge wheel. I want you to picture like the wheel of a captain's ship. Like a captain would spin this wheel. It's a vault. It's this huge metal door, this big spinning wheel, and the door is wide open. There are a few lights on down there. There's a bunch of old desks, some really old books. But we walk through this, and it's a huge area that's fenced off. There's fans everywhere. There's a whole bunch of bunk beds, like dozens upon dozens of bunk beds. And just old shelving. There's some weird red lights that are not lit. You can just see the casing is red. And this area went on and on and on. So nonetheless, we heard, and you could barely hear it, we heard the bell for the next class. That meant lunch was over. So we go flying out of this place. And again, just looking around, it's like we just walked back in time, like, what is this? It's massive. It's probably half, if not 3/4 of the 7th grade hall, including all of the classrooms. And we walk out of this and back up the steps, and we pick Griff up and we walk to the top, and there's the custodian standing. And he said, "What are you guys doing down in there?" And we told him Griff fell through that door and fell down, and kind of everybody knew Griff, and they're like, "Oh, okay, I get it." And sure enough, Griff had broken his arm. No lie. So anyway, they took him on. But I asked that custodian, I'm like, "Did you know that there's like a city underneath this stage? It's this massive area underneath the stage." And he said, "Of course I do. And do you not know that's down there?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't have any idea." I'm like, "What is it?" And he said, "That's a bomb shelter from the Cold War." That's what we're going to talk about today. My city was so, and I shouldn't say city, it's more of a town. It's a little bit smaller than Smithfield, was terrified of the Cold War. So much so that they built a bunker underneath the school. Smithfield has a small bunker, by the way. I believe Clayton also has a tiny one. But if you drive through Cary, the older part, like near the mall, if you look in some of the backyards, you will see something that looks like an igloo. It's actually a bunker. And it was built because of the Cold War. Now, in my particular town, about 40 miles away, there were several massive weapons manufacturers. There is something about my school and those weapon manufacturers that terrified my town, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Let's figure out what the Cold War is. After World War II is over, there are two powerful countries left in all the world: the Soviet Union and the United States. Now, the United States could always tell the Soviet Union, "You guys are strong and you got a lot of soldiers, and we know that you will let your people die. We know that you actually took Berlin. You're the people that took the capital of the Nazis, not us. We know you're powerful. However, we have those bombs that we've dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we've made more of them. So right now we're more powerful than you, so you can have all the folks you want. We can destroy your entire city with the bomb." But later on, our scientists measure that there's been an earthquake in the Soviet Union. And it turns out it wasn't an earthquake. They've come up with the same bombs that we have. Now, what's the big deal about that? The Soviet Union and the United States are the two most powerful countries left on the planet. And they are complete opposites. The United States is capitalist. The United States is a democracy. The Soviet Union is communist. Remember, that uses this heavy-handed socialism? And within communism, you don't really have any rights. The state controls everything. These are two complete opposites of one another. Think if somebody said, "Hey, you want to come over to my house and play Xbox?" And you're like, "No, I only know how to play PlayStation. Would you rather play PlayStation?" That's not that big a difference between Xbox and PlayStation. Somewhat similar, okay? But if your friend said, "Hey, why don't you come over and play Xbox?" And you're like, "No, I thought we could rob a bank." Like, there's no middle ground to that. Do you follow what I'm saying? There's nothing where, well, how about we just make a game out of robbing a bank? No, it's like they're two totally different things. There's not like a middle ground to it. Either you do one or you do the other. They don't go together. In fact, you would probably turn around and say, "What are you talking? Rob a bank? Are you crazy?" So nonetheless, the Soviet Union, we're looking at communism and socialism, the United States, a democracy and capitalism. And now these two ideas are spreading. The United States has taken over large chunks of Western Europe, not to rule it, but just to help it get back on its feet. The same thing with Japan, and even some influences into China and some other places within the East. The Soviets are doing the exact same thing. They have spread their influence through the eastern part of Europe, and they're starting to branch south into other parts of Asia. And they're growing and growing, saying, "Hey, communism is the thing. Join us, join us, join us." And in the middle of a Cold War, if you were to look at a map, the Soviets have more influence and more countries that they're allied with geographically, really, than what the United States has. So this is a scary time. You have two sides pushing two different ideas, two different governments, two different economic systems, two completely different everything, and they're rivals with these massive weapons. That's why my school had built this shelter. That's why there's one at Smithfield, there's one in Clayton, there's one in downtown Cary. Folks were scared that if the Soviet Union and the United States ever go to war, this isn't going to be like World War II. This isn't going to be like World War I. This is going to be something that we would call mutually assured destruction. So this is known as the Cold War. So this first slide is basically what I explained to you. We got two powerful countries left. They've got opposing views on everything. There's no middle ground. It's not Xbox and PlayStation. It's kind of rob a bank and Xbox. There's no middle ground with that person, okay? Now, here is a definition of the Cold War. It's a period of economic, political, and military tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. It lasts from the end of World War II all the way up to 1991. This becomes an arms race. We say, okay, we have the nuke. We have nuclear bombs. The Soviets make them. We make more powerful ones. They make more powerful ones. We make more of the same ones we have. They make more of the same ones they have. This begins to actually branch off into other topics too. Most people don't realize that the first person in space, whenever I ask this question in class, I get answers like Shepard and Armstrong, and no, it's Yuri Gagarin. He is a Russian. He is from the Soviet Union. So he is the first person in space. And the United States freaks out when the Soviet Union is able to put a person in space. Because if they can put a person there, they can put a weapon. So now we have this race. We're going to do one more better than them. We're going to go to space, but then we'll go to the moon. And they're trying to catch up. So it's this race. I want you to think of that. We're going between each other. We're building more things, more weapons, faster airplanes. We're branching out into space. We're trying to outdo each other, but we're not actually fighting. But here's the problem if we did fight. If we did ever fight each other, USA versus USSR, if we did ever fight, it would lead to something right here. Mutually assured destruction. That's why my school had a bomb shelter in it. The thought was, since there's a massive weapons manufacturer about 40 minutes away, the Soviets would bomb that place. That shelter is there to protect the community at the time, or at least some of the community, from the potential fallout, because this will kill everyone. This isn't, oh, this building got bombed. This is, oh, a town 40 minutes away got bombed, and the bomb is so devastating that the fallout actually spreads, the radiation spreads everywhere and kills plants, animals, folks, and makes houses uninhabitable. So this was a real fear between 1945 even up into the early 90s. So that is the Cold War. It's called cold because they don't actually fight. It's called cold because they're not fighting. There's just the threat of a fight. And what makes this a really big deal, both countries now possess weapons that won't destroy cities. They will destroy like partial, like states, not entire states, but parts of states. If they dropped one in Wake County, you would feel it over in Wayne, or you would feel it going toward the beach. Like these are bombs that are big enough to devastate massive areas. And even if you're okay, you didn't feel the bomb, the radiation from the bomb would still impact you. It would impact your water. It could impact your environment. It could impact even your food. Okay. So I'm going to finish this up tomorrow. We'll talk more about it, but I just wanted to give you the basis of what we have. So one more time, we talked about the Cold War. The United States, the Soviet Union are the last two powerful countries left after World War II. And they're complete opposites of one another. And there's a rivalry starts between them. They can't find a middle ground between the two because they're completely opposing ideas. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the lesson. We get a little bit more tomorrow. Thank you so much, and I will see you tomorrow.